I've done a lot of transformation projects and programs over the years. In my view, one of the main reasons that they fail is that because the business change management hasn't been really invested in and really thought about, people get terribly excited, do a project, chuck it over the fence and go, woohoo, there you go, get on with it. So what you've got to do is always put that proverbial cart before the horse to then be able to say, right, okay, this is where it's going to safely land. And by doing that, you've got a much better chance of success.
Welcome to Data and AI Mastery, the podcast where we bring you cutting-edge insights, practical advice, and inspiring stories from the leaders shaping the future of data and AI across the globe. I'm your host, Raoul Irma, founder of Cambridge Spark, the leader in transformational data and AI upskilling, career development, and progression. In each episode, I will be diving into real-world case studies of companies harnessing the power of AI to drive innovation, reduce costs, and create new business opportunities. So whether you're an aspiring data scientist, AI engineer, or seasoned executive, this show is designed to give you the tools and knowledge to stay ahead in a world where data is transforming every aspect of business. Stay ahead, stay inspired, stay masterful. Welcome to Data and AI Mastery. Motia, great to see you. Great to have you on the podcast. I really look forward to our conversation. I thought a good place to start. So you're the Chief Data Officer at the University of Leeds, and I'd love to hear a bit more about your story and what inspired you to pursue a career in data and technology.
I've always been a scientist, so I've always had an interest in the natural world, and therefore that sort of led almost sort of naturally into sort of data and technology, and really sort of as technology started to sort of emerge in the 90s and computers became much more sort of available, and I was intrigued. My natural sort of curious mind sort of wanted to know more, and so that's essentially sort of how I started to get sort of interest. I think my first computer was a ZX Spectrum, so that shows how old I am. So, but there's probably a few people listening on the podcast go, "Oh yes, I remember those." But yeah, that's essentially sort of how I got interested sort of in the technology.
Brilliant. And so what were the kind of like the first interest with computers, from that moment you got to play with first computer to building your career in the data space and, especially transitioning to a leadership role in the field? Would love to hear about the story and, were there any challenges or were there any sort of key moments as part of that career transition?
I've always been in leadership roles. I think I explained to you earlier that I've sort of had three parts to sort of my career. Initially, I sort of started as an army officer, and then I worked for the NHS for a number of years, and now I work at the University of Leeds. So this is my sort of the third part of my career, my sort of academic role. But essentially, I've sort of always been in sort of leadership sort of roles as a graduate of the best leadership academy in the world. You sort of start off pretty pretty much sort of from that sort of premise. But I think from a data perspective, I mean, I've always been in education, so I'm a qualified teacher. I'm actually a chemistry teacher on paper. Not that I've actually sort of done very much of that over the years, but I've always sort of wanted to help people to understand things more, and actually the interest in technology and data-driven decisions and the sort of the evidence, and that comes back to me being a scientist, has always sort of inspired me, and therefore I feel that I can sort of inspire other people in order to be able to do that. So that natural sort of curiosity comes into that particular sort of role. And in terms of sort of challenges, I think when I sort of migrated to being sort of in technology and the sort of data, that was sort of a few years into being in the armed forces, when it's always a bit difficult to justify having teachers in uniform. So when you get to a certain sort of point, you have to specialize in either languages, military history or training support, and I specialised in the latter, and then went to the Royal Military College of Science at Shrivenham and did a postgrad year in advanced information systems, and that's essentially how I sort of transitioned and made that sort of leap into technology. And I think as I then sort of progressed, and particularly into my sort of NHS role, I became more interested in the data itself and what are sort of generated from the systems and how that sort of reflects the real world. And us as people would, I see us as lots of bits of data, almost like the Matrix, sort of, trickling down the screen, sort of being able to see the see the code turning into something tangible. I think is a fascinating sort of way of looking at things, really.
So Monica, I'd love to now focus our conversation on your role as Chief Data Officer at the University of Leeds. I thought maybe a good way to start is let's rewind and, can you walk us through what did the first 90 days look like? So, presumably you create like here's my 90 days plan, and how did it unfold? Love to hear your thinking, your newly appointed CDO. Walk us through your thinking and how did it go?
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of, when I was approached to see if I'd be interested in the role, I was already working for the University of Leeds in a research-funded role as Chief Data Officer for HDI UK for the Hub for Cancer and for the North. And I think I'd been quite vocal about some of the things that were, sort of either missing or that I wanted to be able to sort of do around sort of, data management, data governance and access to data. From previous experience and knowing what had gone right and what had sort of gone wrong with certain sort of initiatives and big transformation initiatives, I sort of said, well, essentially there's three things that I need. First and foremost, we need a data strategy because we didn't have one. So we've got to be really clear about what our strategic goals are, the direction we're heading. Secondly, we need to create a central data service. It's got to be somebody's day job to do this. Otherwise, you're just pushing it on the side of the desk of already very busy people, and you've got to have specialists. That doesn't mean that everything has to be centralized. It's very much a sort of a hub and spoke kind of approach. And thirdly, we needed to be able to fund a proper digital transformation program, sort of data transformation program. So fortuitously, the University of Leeds had already invested in the digital enablement and Be Safe program called DEBS. So that was really about uplifting our sort of offering from a digital perspective, but also making sure that we were sort of had all of our cybersecurity and in place. So that was a £76 million program over 5 years. And I said, I'd like a slice of that. 76 million sounds like quite a lot, but a Russell Group university such as the University of Leeds has 40,000 students and 10,000 staff, has a turnover of £1 billion a year. So essentially, that's actually only really about 1%. So, but I said I'd like a couple of million of that to do a proper data transformation program. And if I can have those three things, then I'll take the job. So you get to my age and you can be demanding. So, and they said, yes. So I said, okay, that's good. I'll do it.
That's great. There's so much I want to unpack from what you said, but let's focus on the budget maybe first. Talk us through the negotiation process, if any, or how did you come up with, I need that percentage of the 76 million? Like, how did you frame it? Because, a lot of, people in industry have to ask for budget, and especially for data transformation, it can be difficult. So how did you pull it off?
Yeah, I mean, I think there had been obviously sort of a business case for the overall sort of, digital enablement. And I think there was an expectation that there would need to be some investment in sort of data. But in terms of sort of, the actual data service itself, then it needed to be a team of about between sort of 10 to 15 people. So that comes in at around about £1 million recurring budget. So that was pretty easy to do. In terms of the data transformation program itself, I didn't want it to be sort of so complex and so long that we didn't actually get on and do it. I wanted it to have pace and to be able to sort of deliver. And the two main things in terms of the technological sort of investment were to have a proper central data repository, because there was no central data warehousing function at all, for that to be cloud-based rather than on-premise, for it to be using the latest technology, and also to have a proper integration platform that actually could then, in a standardized way, link up our sort of core systems and be able to get the data into the CDR. You essentially just tot that up. And I've done it a couple of times before in the NHS, both sort of locally and regionally. So, you get to know how much stuff costs and what's realistic. And so that's how we came up with the business case, and then took that to our transformation office. We asked for 2.1 million and got 1.8, which is not bad. So, it's around about the 2 million sort of mark, really, for an 18-month sort of program that gives you that real kind of impetus and being able to sort of drive things forward. Yeah.
Brilliant. No, so many takeaways I'm getting from the conversation. One is, I guess, it's good to be demanding and, and make your case. Two, I guess you expect a bit of negotiation, so it's better to kind of like push it up, knowing that it's going to come down probably. And then kind of, I guess, the combination of people, budget, and then technology enablement budget, that makes a lot of sense. So I'd love to explore the data strategy that you've mentioned. So to replay back, so there's three components: the data strategy, the centralized service sort of effort and team, and third, a kind of like more general digital transformation push. What did you need to do to come up with the data strategy? I guess, what was your diagnostic, your initial sort of maybe audit and diagnostic that led to the data strategy, which I guess informed the budget? And if you can talk us through what sort of measure of success did you establish as part of your strategy? Because this kind of like information is really hard to get in the public, right?
Yeah, it is. And, I have a bit of a sort of a rule about sort of writing a strategy, or sort of in particular around sort of documents, and never make it any longer than 10 pages because nobody will read it. But actually, it sort of works. It's a bit like the standard sort of, data set in the NHS. The optimum side of a data set is about 100 data items, because that's essentially the size of a Pokemon deck. And that's what, the human brain can actually retain that amount of information of 100 data items and the metadata and the attributes. So, but that's another story. So
it's a good one, though. Like Pokemon's is good enough.
Exactly. So, but actually, joking apart, having something that has that clarity, that is just a 10-page sort of document, but actually describes the current situation. It needed to link into our university overarching 10-year global strategy that our vice chancellor had developed and published sort of about a year or so previously. So it was about looking through the data lens for it to be a sort of sub-strategy, but also calling out some of the challenges that we have around, whether that's student education, whether that's our corporate processes and services, or whether that's for sort of research. And actually then putting a framework to place. And we've got sort of 5 components within the data strategy around identification of data, storage, processing, and actually sort of putting an easily sort of understandable sort of framework, but then being really clear about the roadmap. Because when I first arrived, people went, "Oh, thank goodness you're here, Monica. Here, have all of this crud." And I went, "No, I'm not doing that," because you need to have a framework in order to be able to do things and to make them change. Otherwise, you're just replacing chaos with chaos. So it goes back to that point I made earlier about sort of turning disorder into order. But, a picture paints 1,000 words. So I had a 3-year roadmap on a 1-pager that said every quarter, this is essentially what we'll achieve by. And the first sort of 90 days was doing a lot of listening to people, a lot of actually absorbing what people's problems were, what's the thing that they can't do now that they really need to be able to do, deliver and commit to delivering on those sort of benefits. And it's really important to actually say up front what the benefits are going to be. And for me, the underpinning benefit is about turning data from being a burden into an asset, because people spend a lot of time data wrangling, cranking the handle, doing central returns for very little sort of return. So by having an end-to-end flow, by getting the data from our core systems, putting it into a central repository in real time, being able to go into that environment, do sort of, real time analytics, predictive analytics, be able to have that control loop so that you can essentially improve the quality in your core systems, because you have to do that back at the beginning, to be able to do that and to commit to it. And then we published the data strategy as part of the Leeds Digital Festival in September 2022. So it's more than just the university. It was about the city of Leeds. It's about our part in that sort of place. And then we started and recruited the data service, central data service, at the end of that year, so that when the transformation program started, there was actually, sort of a permanent team to pick up all of the data products as they came out of the program. Because I've done a lot of transformation projects and programs over the years. In my view, one of the main reasons that they fail is that because the business change management hasn't been really invested in and really thought about, people get terribly excited, do a project, chuck it over the fence and go, woohoo, there you go, get on with it. So what you've got to do is always put that proverbial cart before the horse to then be able to say, right, okay, this is where it's going to safely land. And by doing that, you've got a much better chance of success.
It's fascinating to get that level of detail of your thinking and how it unfolded. So I'd love to continue and, ask a couple of low-level questions, which I think will be helpful to the audience. So, that 10-page document you mentioned, can you walk us through, how long did it take you to produce it? Was it literally, is it just a Word document? Are there slides? How did you have to present it? Was there any bumps in the road to defend it? Or was it just a smooth process? Here it is, let me get on with it. Can you just walk us through the specific details?
Yeah, I think it's really important to take on board sort of what people have said to you and be able to take them on that journey with you. So obviously, doing a first draft is just something that you do on your own, inside your own head, and then start to surface that, both sort of internally and feeding that back to sort of colleagues who've sort of participated in it. And then we went through a proper, a consultation, asking for sort of feedback, doing both presentations internally, but also sort of, externally. And then I was absolutely determined that it would be publicly available, so that this wasn't something that was just going to be, on a dusty tome on a shelf. So it's publicly available at data.leeds.ac.uk.
But
so
why were you so adamant that it has to be public, actually? I'd love to understand.
Because it's about holding you to account and actually saying, look, this is what we said we were going to do. This is how we were going to do it. And I actually came up with 10 commitments that actually I'd said to the Vice Chancellor at the time, well, if I hadn't delivered those in 3 years, he could sack me. And I meant that, obviously I quite like to take the pension with me, but I genuinely meant that. And so the commitments are there, everything from some of the technological sort of delivery to actually helping colleagues to make data-driven decisions, turning that burden into an asset and actually linking it into our overarching strategy. I think you've got to have that kind of commitment and also the determination to succeed. I think it's also important to have a plan B and quite often a plan C as well. So the overarching sort of roadmap remained the same, but there's a bit of testing and adjusting as you go along, and it's about not being put off when you hit some of the buffers, perhaps some of the resistance, perhaps some of the sort of, things that don't quite happen in the order that you'd anticipated them, but actually not being put off by that. And I think that's really important, but also continuing to play back what the progress is against the plan and just being honest and upfront about it.
Oh, I love it. Making your data strategy public in order to create accountability and awareness. I think that's brilliant. And I'm sure a lot of people out there can learn from that. So thank you for sharing that. So if I play it back and bring you to the centralized versus decentralized service approach, because it sounds like when you designed the data strategy, it was really important to connect with the business outcomes or intended outcomes of the sort of 10-year strategy you mentioned of University of Leeds, making sure that we make data work for specific impactful outcomes, like you mentioned around maybe student satisfaction and so on. Now, out of that, it feels, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Monica, the sort of the key guiding principle to make that happen was to create a central service team or central service function, because it sounded like, that's the first thing you asked for budget to make that happen. Can you walk us through why did you go down the route of centralized service? And did that evolve over time or not? Because, in the industry, there's always tension between centralization and decentralization in order to kind of like remove inertia, speed up, but it can get more complex if you decentralize. Can you walk us through that dilemma and how did it evolve or maybe not over time?
It goes back to the point that I made, that it's got to be somebody's day job. And that actually is fundamental. And this was a new service. So actually having that centralized control under the direction of the chief data officer and creating a sort of a head of service, but then essentially working out what the sort of functional areas are within that. So within the data services team, there are data engineers, there's the data engineering team, there's a data modeling team, there's a data integration team, there's a data governance and quality team, and then the overarching service management. So those are essentially the core components of that. But when I started in my role, I asked HR to send me a list of everybody that had data in their title across the university, and there was 125 people. So those are people who were already in roles, whether they were funded by the sort of faculties, the schools, whether they were research funded. And actually, I think it's important as a sort of a hub and a spoke sort of model to be able to link those things up. So they were blissfully unaware of each other and anything, else that they were sort of doing. And actually, there had been a data analyst network that had sort of been set up, but had sort of slightly fallen into sort of abeyance, and then we were able to regenerate that. And now we've got 400 people within that network. It's an online network, but we have face-to-face sort of events. And actually the central data service has sort of worked with other colleagues to actually bring them together and to help to energize them. So I think it's about understanding sort of what is best done in a centralized function for efficiency, economies of scale, all those kind of things, but also recognizing that in order to be able to pervade that good practice, you have to do it sort of out in the field. So, but that can be quite an organic thing. It doesn't necessarily need to be sort of rigid. And so that's the approach that we've taken. We're now 15 strong in the central data service. And of those people, about half of them were already working for the university. I was sort of brought into the data team, and about half of them I brought in from other industries, because I wanted that freshness, that experience, that innovation of working, whether it was in retail or telecommunications or other sort of industries, being able to bring that in for quite a fresh and vibrant sort of view of things, and sort of pull people out where they've been buried down in the depths of IT, who were actually really, really good at data integration or other sort of things, and bring them into that sort of, team that was able to drive things forward.
It sounds like there are two core principles that have guided you. Of course, we talked about accountability as the first one, when you make your data strategy public. The other one is ownership. As you said, like it needs to be somebody's job. So, you made it a priority to really sort out access, understanding, governance of data. And that's what drew the centralized sort of service model. So that's fascinating to hear. Monica, my final question before we do like a quick round of fire question is, I ask you, what did the first sort of 90 days look like? So you kind of like set up the data strategy, you had to kind of like defend a budget and then, roll it out. So let's move all the way to today. On reflection, it'd be great to hear, the impact of your work, where you are and what's coming next as well.
What I'm working on now really is the next stage of data literacy and data maturity. So I think those are the two sort of key things for the next. A couple of weeks ago, we held a senior leaders data literacy day where I invited 20 of the sort of most senior people in the university, from deputy vice chancellors to deans to heads of school to directors. and actually just I'd had them in a room for a day working with a couple of SME sort of and companies, and really sort of helped and supported and educated them as essentially the business owners and the sort of data controllers, for want of a better word, to really understand what they can do to move things forward, but also to reflect back on what we've delivered so far and what they want the next 3 years to look like. So that was a huge success, and the feedback that we got was really awesome. And then essentially data maturity measurements. Sort of, you've got to know where you've come from. We measured our sort of data maturity when we started; it was pretty low. We then did another sort of assessment, and it's getting better. I've been working with JISC in particular, sort of around their data maturity sort of framework, which they've sort of soft launched, and will be doing the main sort of launch in January as part of the Data Matters conference in Salford. I'm a keynote speaker for, and actually being able to help people to know how to measure their data maturity, where the gaps are, where to plug those, and to have that sort of improvement. So those are the two key things that I'm working on next.
So I'd like to wrap up with some sort of quick fire questions just to get to know you a bit better. So just answer them, whatever comes naturally. So first question is, what was your favorite subject at school?
Well, it was science, really. So biology, I think, actually, biology and chemistry were my favorite ones.
Next question is, what's your favorite programming language?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, I learned to code in Ada and PL1, so that shows how old I am. Yes.
Ada? I've not heard of Ada in a while, Monica. That's so cool.
Yeah, Ada 95. So I have a very nostalgic sort of, attachment to that.
It's great answer. Completely unexpected. Last two questions. What's your favorite music genre?
Oh, goodness me. I like jazz and I like country.
And final question. You see, Monica, I'm a bit of a sweet tooth. So what's your favorite dessert?
Probably chocolate profiteroles.
Well, Monica, thank you for your time today. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and there's so many incredible takeaways that I'm sure will be really helpful for all the audience listening. So thank you, Monica. Great to see you.
Thanks, Raoul. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Hey, it was a really fascinating conversation with Monica. I've really enjoyed it. What I really love about our conversation is how we made it really real, right? So starting with the process of designing the data strategy and how that looked like. So there's so many good takeaways. The first one is keep it simple, really. She mentioned that, you got to stick to 10 pages. Otherwise, nobody's going to read it. And it's going to be really difficult to get people on board. So I love that she kept it simple, short, focused. What I also love is how she created accountability to herself and her team by making the data strategy public. I think that's very brave, and that's a fantastic way to create accountability, but also to raise awareness about the effort from the data office. So it's like a double whammy. So I think that was really good. I also like how she really connected the data strategy with the wider strategy of the University of Leeds and connect to tangible business outcomes, because that really resonate with stakeholders that ultimately have to back her strategy and unlock the budget. So that was really, really helpful to hear. And from the strategy cascade down to what was the guiding principle to make it happen. So the idea of we have to create a centralized service to make data a priority and make it work and create ownership. It needs to be somebody's job, like Monica pointed out. So it's really great to hear how the data strategy cascades into an operational plan that's driven by the centralized service team. And then, recruiting the team, the effort needed there, the focus on creating a diverse team. So really awesome episode, so many takeaways for everyone. So thank you for listening and see you next time. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Data and AI Mastery. If you found value in today's discussion, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an insight from the leaders driving the future of data and AI. And if you're a data and AI leader looking to upskill your workforce with the fundamental data and AI skills to transform your business, Cambridge Spark is here to guide you every step of the way. Be sure to reach out to us on LinkedIn or on our website, cambridgespark.com. Until then, be sure to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with data, and remember, mastery comes with continued learning and action. Until next time, stay ahead, stay inspired, and stay masterful.